The scent of her blood reached him before he saw her crumpled form on the ancient stone steps, and for a moment Konstantin Draven believed the dawn itself had delivered him a gift wrapped in mortal flesh and desperation. He had been standing at the window of his manor's upper hall, watching the first pale threads of sunlight begin to stain the horizon with dangerous light, counting the minutes until he would need to retreat into the darkness of his chambers. The hunt was scheduled to begin in less than an hour, a sacred tradition among his kind, where the vampire nobility would ride through the protected forests of his estate, chasing deer and wild boar beneath the safety of the ancient trees that blocked out the killing sun. It was a display of power, a reminder that even in this modern world of smartphones and skyscrapers, the old ways still held dominion in certain places. His guests were already assembled in the great hall below, their voices carrying up through the stone corridors in anticipation. Then her scent had drifted through the barely open window, so rich and intoxicating that his fangs had extended involuntarily, his centuries of control momentarily forgotten. Konstantin moved with the supernatural speed of his kind, reaching the front entrance in a blur of motion that would have been invisible to human eyes. He wrenched open the heavy oak door, heedless of the servants who stumbled back in surprise, and there she was. A young woman collapsed across the bottom 3 steps as though she had been climbing toward the door and simply run out of strength. Her dark hair spilled across the stone like ink, and her skin, normally olive-toned, he suspected had gone the color of old parchment. She wore jeans and a thin jacket that had done nothing to protect her from the cold spring night, and both were torn in places, stained with dirt and what might have been blood. But it was her face that stopped him. Even unconscious, even marked by exhaustion and whatever had driven her to his door, she was achingly lovely. High cheekbones, a full mouth, dark lashes that lay like crescents against her pale cheeks. She looked perhaps 23 or 24, young by human standards, impossibly young by his own. "Sire." His chamberlain, Lucien, appeared at his elbow, white-haired and elegant in his formal attire. "The sun rises, you must come inside. We can have the servants." "I will carry her," Konstantin said, and bent to gather her into his arms before Lucien could protest. She weighed almost nothing, and up close, her scent was even more devastating. It wasn't just blood, though that was certainly part of it. She had a small cut on her temple, another on her palm. No, it was something else, something he couldn't quite name. She smelled like rain and old books and something wild like wind over mountains. Like hope, if hope had a scent. He carried her inside, and Lucien shut the door firmly behind them, blocking out the creeping dawn. Several of the other vampires had emerged from the great hall, drawn by the commotion. Konstantin recognized Lord Severin, Lady Morgana, and half a dozen others, all of them ancient, all of them powerful, all of them staring at the human woman in his arms with expressions ranging from curiosity to hunger. "Well," Morgana said, her voice like poisoned honey. She was beautiful in the way all of their kind were beautiful: white skin, white hair that fell to her waist, eyes the color of frozen lakes. "What an interesting development. Have you taken to ordering breakfast delivery, Konstantin?" A few of the others laughed, but Konstantin's expression silenced them quickly. He was their king not just by title but by strength, and they knew better than to push him too far. "The hunt is cancelled," he announced, his voice carrying through the hall with absolute authority. "I require privacy. All of you will remain in the guest wing until I say otherwise." There was a moment of stunned silence. Lord Severin, bold as always, stepped forward. "Cancelled? But sire, we have been planning this for months." "The preparations alone are meaningless compared to the situation at hand," Konstantin interrupted. "This woman appeared on my doorstep at dawn, clearly fleeing something. Until I know what and why, no one leaves this manor. And before you ask, Severin, no, you may not sample her blood, nor may anyone else. She is under my protection. Is that understood?" He let a thread of compulsion enter his voice, the ancient power that made him king. One by one the others nodded, though Morgana's eyes narrowed with something that might have been suspicion or simply interest. "Lucien," Konstantin said, "have someone prepare the rose chamber. Send for Dr. Thorne, the human physician from the city. Discretion is essential." "At once, sire." Lucien vanished with vampiric speed, leaving Konstantin alone with his unwelcome audience. He didn't wait for them to disperse. Instead, he carried the woman up the grand staircase, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, too fast, too weak but steady. Alive. Whatever had happened to her, she had survived long enough to reach him. The question was why. His estate was miles from the nearest city, hidden behind gates and walls and protective spells that had been woven centuries ago. No human should have been able to find it, let alone reach the front door. Yet here she was, delivered to him like some kind of miracle or curse, and he had just cancelled a sacred tradition to ensure her safety. He should have let the servants handle it. He should have retreated to his chambers and let Lucien deal with the situation. But something about her called to him, something that went beyond hunger or even desire. Looking at her unconscious face, he felt an emotion he hadn't experienced in over 500 years, the desperate need to protect. The Rose Chamber was one of the finest guest rooms in the manor, so named for the silk wallpaper patterned with antique roses and the massive four-poster bed draped in velvet the color of old wine. By the time he arrived, 2 servants had already turned down the covers and lit the fire in the marble hearth. They bowed and retreated without a word, well trained in reading their master's moods. Konstantin laid her gently on the bed, arranging her limbs so she looked less like a broken doll and more like someone sleeping. This close, he could see the shadows under her eyes, the way her lips were chapped from dehydration. She had been running for a while, he realized. Running hard and far, with nothing but determination keeping her on her feet. From what, or from whom? He should have been able to scent other vampires on her if one of his kind had been hunting her, but there was nothing except her own intoxicating smell and the faint traces of city streets, exhaust and concrete and humanity packed too close together. No other predators, no obvious danger, yet danger had clearly found her anyway. Lucien appeared in the doorway with a basin of warm water and clean cloths. "Dr. Thorne is on his way. He will arrive within the hour." "Good." Konstantin took the basin and set it on the bedside table. "Have someone find clothes that will fit her, and food, human food. Soup, bread, something gentle." "Of course." Lucien hesitated. "Sire, if I may, the others are already gossiping, canceling the hunt for a human woman." "Let them gossip," Konstantin said flatly. He dampened one of the cloths and began carefully cleaning the dirt from her face, revealing more of her delicate features. "I am not in the habit of explaining myself to anyone." "No, sire, but Lady Morgana was saying—" "I don't care what Morgana was saying." He rinsed the cloth and moved to her hands, gently wiping away the grime. The cut on her palm was shallow but dirty, probably from a fall. "This woman came to me for help. Whether she knows what I am or not, she sought sanctuary here. I won't betray that." Lucien bowed. "As you wish. I will ensure the staff understands she is to be treated as an honored guest." Alone again, Konstantin continued his ministrations with a care that would have shocked anyone who knew his reputation. The Vampire King was not known for gentleness. He had earned his crown through strength and ruthlessness, had held it for 3 centuries through unwavering authority. He had executed traitors, waged wars against rival clans, and ruled his territory with an iron fist wrapped in silk gloves. But something about this fragile human made him want to be careful, to be softer. He finished cleaning her face and hands, then pulled the heavy coverlet up to her shoulders. The fire was warming the room nicely, and color was already beginning to return to her cheeks. Her heartbeat had steadied, her breathing deepened. She would wake soon, he thought, and then he would have answers. He pulled a chair close to the bedside and settled in to wait. Even though dawn had fully arrived and every instinct screamed at him to retreat to the darkness of his protected chambers. The Rose Chamber's windows were covered with heavy drapes, blocking out most of the light, and he was old enough that indirect sunlight wouldn't kill him immediately. It would hurt, certainly would drain his strength and leave him vulnerable, but he could endure it for a while. For her, he could endure it. That thought should have troubled him, but somehow it didn't. An hour passed, then 2. Dr. Thorne arrived, a middle-aged human who knew exactly what Konstantin was and had been well paid for both his services and his silence over the years. He examined the woman quickly and efficiently, checking her pulse, her breathing, her pupils. "Exhaustion and dehydration, mainly," Thorne reported, packing away his instruments. "The cuts are superficial. No signs of serious injury, though there are some older bruises on her arms and legs. Nothing recent, probably a few days old. I'd guess she's been on the run for at least 48 hours without adequate food, water, or rest. Her body simply gave out, but she'll recover?" Konstantin heard the edge in his own voice, sharper than intended. "Oh yes, with rest and proper care. I've left instructions with your chamberlain. Hydration is the priority, then small amounts of food once she wakes. She should be back to full strength in a day or 2. Thorne paused, studying Konstantin with the boldness of someone who had known him for many years. "Might I ask what a young woman was doing collapsing on your doorstep?" "When I know, you'll know," Konstantin said, which was as much of a dismissal as the doctor was going to get. After Thorne left, Konstantin returned to his vigil. The day crept by with agonizing slowness, the sunlight beyond the drapes a constant pressure against his senses. He could feel it even through stone and fabric, that burning presence that had been the enemy of his kind since the first vampire walked the earth. His skin prickled with discomfort, and exhaustion pulled at him. Day was meant for sleeping. not watching over mysterious human women, but he didn't leave. Finally, as the afternoon shadows began to lengthen, her eyes fluttered open. They were brown. He discovered a warm, deep brown like polished mahogany, flecked with gold. They blinked once, twice, confusion written clearly across her features as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Then her gaze found him, and she went very still. "Please don't be afraid," he said softly. Though he knew how he must look to her, a strange man sitting beside her bed, his white hair and pale skin probably otherworldly in the firelight. "You're safe. You collapsed on my doorstep this morning. I brought you inside." She stared at him for a long moment, and he watched awareness sharpen in her eyes. Whatever she had been running from, the memory was clearly returning. Her hand moved beneath the coverlet, and he suspected she was checking for something, a weapon perhaps, or some talisman she'd been carrying. "Where?" Her voice came out as a croak, rough from disuse and dehydration. She swallowed and tried again. "Where am I?" "My home. My estate, rather. It's quite large. You're about 40 miles north of the city in the old country region." He gestured to the bedside table, where Lucien had left a pitcher of water and a glass. "May I?" At her tiny nod, he poured water and helped her sit up enough to drink. She took the glass with trembling hands and drank deeply, desperately, water running down her chin. When it was empty, he refilled it, and she drank that too. "Thank you," she whispered, sinking back against the pillows. Some of the cloudiness had left her eyes, but she still looked exhausted, her body too heavy for her own strength. I don't remember how I got here. I was running, and then you collapsed on my steps just as dawn broke," Konstantin finished. "Can you tell me your name?" She hesitated, and he saw the calculation behind her eyes, trying to decide how much to reveal, whether to trust him. It was wise, that hesitation. She had clearly learned to be careful. "Claire," she said finally. "Claire Zimmerman, Claire." He tested the name, found he liked the way it sounded. "I am Konstantin Draven. This is my estate, and you are under my protection now. Whatever you were running from can't reach you here." Something flickered across her face, hope maybe, or disbelief. "You don't know what I was running from, then tell me." She looked away, her fingers plucking at the coverlet. "You wouldn't believe me." Konstantin almost laughed, but he sensed that would be the wrong response. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, making sure she could see his face clearly in the firelight. "Miss Zimmerman, I have lived a very long time and seen many impossible things. Try me." That made her look at him again, really look at him, and he saw the moment understanding dawned. Her eyes widened, her pulse jumped, he could hear it spike, that sudden acceleration of her heart. But interestingly, she didn't scream, didn't try to flee. She simply stared at him with something like wonder. "You're one of them," she breathed. "Aren't you? A vampire?" "Yes." No point in denying it, not when she'd already guessed. "And before you ask, yes, the stories are mostly true. We drink blood, we burn in sunlight, we live for centuries. But I promise you, I mean you no harm. You came to me seeking sanctuary whether you knew it or not, and I will honor that." "I didn't know," she said quickly. "I swear I was just running and I saw the gates and thought maybe I could hide on the grounds or find a groundskeeper's cottage or something. I didn't mean to." She broke off, pressing a hand to her mouth as tears suddenly filled her eyes. "Oh God, I led them right to you. If they followed me, who?" Konstantin's voice sharpened. "Who followed you, Claire?" "The Shadowborn." The name came out barely above a whisper, laden with terror. "They've been hunting me for 3 days, ever since I saw what they did." Konstantin went very still. The Shadowborn were vampires, but not like him or his court. They were rogues, outcasts who had rejected the old laws and the old ways. They fed without restraint, killed without mercy, and worst of all, they created new vampires, indiscriminately turning humans and then abandoning them to go mad with bloodlust. Every vampire king or queen in the world had standing orders to eliminate Shadowborn on sight, but they were clever and secretive, operating in the darkness between territories. "Tell me everything," he commanded, and this time there was no softness in his voice, only the steel of a king preparing for war. Claire's story came out haltingly, broken by tears and trembling. She had been working late at the university library where she was a graduate student, researching folklore and mythology for her thesis. She'd left through the back exit around midnight, taking a shortcut through an alley she'd used dozens of times before. "There were 4 of them," she said, her hands fisting in the coverlet. "They had this man, I don't know who he was, and they were feeding on him, all 4 at once like animals. I should have run immediately, but I was frozen, and then one of them looked up and saw me." She smiled, and her face was covered in blood, and she said, Claire's voice broke. "She said I smelled delicious." "You ran," Konstantin said. "I ran. I didn't think I just ran. I heard them laughing behind me like it was a game. I made it to the main street where there were people and lights and they didn't follow. But the next night, I saw one of them outside my apartment building, just standing there watching my window, and I knew they were playing with me, hunting me. Konstantin's jaw tightened. It was a common Shadowborn tactic, terrorizing their prey before the kill, drawing out the fear to make the blood taste sweeter. Monsters in every sense of the word. I packed a bag and left that night through the fire escape, Claire continued. I didn't know where to go. I have family in the city, but I couldn't risk leading those things to them. So I just kept moving, staying in public places during the day, hiding at night. But they kept finding me. Every time I thought I'd lost them, one would appear. They were hurting me, I think, driving me away from the populated areas. Until you ended up here, Konstantin finished. In my territory. I didn't know it was your territory, she said miserably. I didn't know any of this was real until 3 days ago. Vampires were just stories, just the myths I was studying for my degree. And now, she laughed a broken sound. Now I'm in a vampire king's manor, telling him that other vampires want to eat me. My life has become a very bad gothic novel. Despite everything, Konstantin felt a small smile tug at his lips. Your life has become complicated, certainly. But I meant what I said. You're safe here. The Shadowborn won't dare enter my lands. I'm one of the oldest and most powerful vampires in this part of the world, and they know that challenging me would mean death. But for how long? Claire's voice was small, frightened. I can't stay here forever. Eventually I'll have to leave, and they'll be waiting. Then we'll deal with them before you leave, Konstantin said simply. Shadowborn are a plague that needs to be eliminated anyway. You've simply given me an excuse to finally hunt down this particular pack. She looked at him with those wide brown eyes, hope and disbelief warring on her face. You'd do that for me? You don't even know me. I know you collapsed on my doorstep seeking sanctuary, he said. That's enough. And besides, he paused, considering his words. The Shadowborn broke our oldest law when they revealed themselves to you, and again when they let their prey die in public view. They threaten the careful balance we've maintained with the human world for centuries. Eliminating them is my duty as king. It wasn't the whole truth. He would have hunted them for her sake alone, but it was true enough, and she seemed to accept it. Some of the tension left her shoulders, and she sagged back against the pillows. Thank you, she whispered. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but thank you. Rest now, Konstantin said, standing. You're still weak from your ordeal. I'll have food sent up, and later we can discuss the details of finding your hunters. For now, just focus on recovering. He made it halfway to the door before her voice stopped him.
Konstantin?
He turned back. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, curiosity mixed with something softer. Why did you cancel the hunt? She asked. I heard you telling the others when I was waking up. That's important, isn't it? And you gave it up to stay with me. He should have deflected, made some excuse about duty or protocol. Instead, he found himself telling her the truth. Because the moment I caught your scent, nothing else mattered, he said quietly. I don't understand it myself, but there it is. You matter, Claire Zimmerman. More than hunts or traditions or anything else. He left before she could respond, closing the door gently behind him. The hallway was dark, proper nighttime now, the sun finally set. Konstantin felt strength flooding back into his limbs as the daylight exhaustion lifted. He'd sat beside her bed through an entire day, resisting every instinct that told him to seek the safety of darkness. For her, he needed to think about what that meant. But first he had other responsibilities. He found Lucien in the main hall, coordinating the evening meal for their guests. The chamberlain took one look at his face and dismissed the servants with a gesture. The woman? Lucien asked. Her name is Claire, and she's being hunted by Shadowborn. 4 of them, possibly more. Konstantin outlined the situation quickly, watching Lucien's expression darken. In your territory, the older vampire said flatly. They dared to hunt in your territory. It gets worse. They witnessed a public kill and then revealed themselves to a human. This isn't just a breach of my borders, it's a violation of the Covenant. The Covenant was the ancient agreement between all vampire nations, the laws that kept their existence secret from the wider human world. Breaking it was punishable by death, no exceptions. You'll need to inform the council, Lucien said. I will, but first I need to eliminate the immediate threat. I want our best trackers scouring the borders. The Shadowborn must have followed Claire's trail at least part of the way here. Find where they lost her and backtrack from there. I want to know where they're hiding, and when we find them. Konstantin's smile was cold and sharp. Then I'll remind them why I'm called king. Over the next 2 days, Claire recovered her strength while Konstantin's people searched for the Shadowborn. He visited her frequently, bringing her books from his library when she mentioned missing her research, sitting with her in the evenings while she ate human food, and he pretended the scent of her blood wasn't driving him slowly mad with hunger. They talked about her studies, about his long life, about everything and nothing. He learned that she was 24, that she'd lost both parents in a car accident when she was 19, that she had no siblings or close family. Her life had been built around her academic work, around understanding the myths and legends of cultures around the world. "It's funny," she said one evening, curled up in the window seat of the Rose Chamber while Konstantin occupied his usual chair nearby. "I've spent 6 years studying vampire folklore and I got almost everything wrong." "Such as?" He was amused despite himself. "Well, the garlic thing is nonsense, obviously, and crosses don't do anything. You can enter homes without invitation. You literally carried me into yours. And you're not dead, you're very much alive." "We are dead, technically," Konstantin corrected. "Our hearts beat only a few times per hour and we don't breathe unless we're speaking. But we're not soulless corpses, if that's what you mean. We're simply changed." "How old were you when you were changed?" 28. "I was a prince in what is now Romania. Back in the early 1500s. A vampire lord named Vladislav came to my father's court and he paused, remembering. "I demanded he turn me. I wanted his power, his immortality. I was young and arrogant and thought I could reshape the world if I only had enough time. He agreed, on the condition that I survive my first century. Most new vampires, don't they lose themselves to the bloodlust or make stupid mistakes that get them killed?" "But you survived," Claire said softly. "I survived, I learned. I built a territory, then an empire. I've been king for 300 years now, ruling over every vampire in this region, and in all that time I've never—" He stopped, unsure how to finish. "Never what?" "Never felt like this," he admitted, meeting her eyes. "Never wanted to protect someone so desperately. Never sat through an entire day in the burning sunlight just to be near someone when they woke. You've been here 3 days, Claire, and you've turned my world upside down." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the window glass. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I feel it too," she whispered. "This pull between us. I should be terrified of you. You're a vampire, a predator, someone who drinks blood to survive. But when I'm with you, I feel safer than I've ever felt in my life. Like nothing can hurt me as long as you're near." Konstantin was across the room in a heartbeat, kneeling beside the window seat so they were eye to eye. "Claire, I know it's impossible," she continued, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I know I'm just a human and you're immortal, and this can't work. But I can't help how I feel." "You think I care that you're human?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "You think that matters to me at all? Claire, I have lived for over 5 centuries, and I have never met anyone, human or vampire, who has affected me the way you do. These past days, getting to know you, hearing your thoughts, seeing your smile, it's been the most alive I've felt in longer than I can remember." "But I'll age," she protested. "I'll grow old and die while you stay young forever." "How can that possibly?" "There are ways," he interrupted. "Options. But we don't have to think about that now. For now, can we just—" He took her hand, marveling at how warm her skin felt against his cool palm. "Can we just allow ourselves this? Whatever this is between us." She looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. "I'd like that," she said softly. "Very much." He leaned forward and she met him halfway, and when their lips touched, Konstantin felt something he'd thought long dead stir in his chest. Her mouth was warm and soft, tasting of the tea she'd been drinking, and when her fingers threaded through his white hair, he made a sound that was almost a growl. She pulled back, breathless, her cheeks flushed. "Your eyes," she whispered. "What about them?" "They're glowing, red like embers." He closed his eyes, forcing control. "Apologies. It happens when our emotions run high. Don't apologize." She touched his cheek and he opened his eyes to find her smiling. "It's beautiful. You're beautiful." "Claire." A sharp knock on the door interrupted them. Konstantin pulled back reluctantly as Lucien entered, his expression grave. "We found them," the Chamberlain announced. "The Shadowborn. They've taken refuge in the old industrial complex on the eastern edge of your territory. 5 of them, not 4, there was another we didn't account for." Konstantin rose to his feet, instantly focused. "Gather our strongest fighters. We move tonight." "Already done, sire. 20 of us, all veterans. More than enough to handle 5 rogues." "I'm coming with you," Claire said, standing. Both vampires turned to stare at her. Konstantin shook his head firmly. "Absolutely not. It's too dangerous." "They're hunting me," she countered. "I have a right to see this through." "You have a right to stay safe in this manor where they can't reach you," Konstantin said. His voice had taken on that commanding edge again, the tone that made other vampires bow. But Claire just lifted her chin stubbornly. "I'm not asking for permission," she said. "I'm telling you I'm coming. You can either let me ride with you or I'll follow on my own. Your choice." They stared at each other for a long moment, wills clashing. Finally, Konstantin sighed. You stay behind me at all times, he said. You don't engage, you don't put yourself at risk. If I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. Lucien, find her something appropriate to wear. Sturdy clothes, boots, and a weapon something silver. The chamberlain bowed and withdrew, though not before Konstantin caught the amused glint in his eyes. The old vampire was enjoying this far too much. An hour later, they rode out 20 vampires on horseback, moving through the night-dark forest with supernatural grace. Claire rode beside Konstantin on a gentle mare, dressed in borrowed clothes that were slightly too large but serviceable. She'd tucked a silver knife into her belt, though he doubted she'd need it. He had no intention of letting any Shadowborn get close enough to threaten her. The industrial complex had been abandoned for decades, a rusting corpse of factories and warehouses slowly being reclaimed by nature. It was the perfect hiding place for rogues, plenty of dark corners, lots of escape routes, and far enough from human habitation that screams wouldn't attract attention. They dismounted a quarter-mile out and approached on foot, spreading out to surround the main building. Konstantin kept Claire close to his side, one hand on her arm as they moved through the shadows. He could smell them now, the distinctive scent of Shadowborn, blood and corruption and madness. 5 distinct signatures, just as Lucien had reported. They were inside the largest warehouse, probably thinking themselves safe in his territory, arrogant enough to believe a vampire king wouldn't bother with a handful of rogues. They were about to learn otherwise. Konstantin gestured, and his people moved into position, blocking every exit, every window, every possible escape route. Then he and Lucien, with Claire safely between them, approached the main entrance. "Stay behind me," he reminded her one last time. She nodded, her face pale but determined. He didn't bother with stealth or surprise. Instead, he kicked the warehouse door hard enough to tear it off its hinges, the shriek of metal echoing through the cavernous space. "Shadowborn," his voice rang out, amplified by will and power. "You have violated the laws of my territory and broken the covenant. Come out and face judgment, or I will drag you out myself." For a moment there was only silence. Then laughter, high and cold and utterly mad, echoed from the darkness above. A figure dropped from the rafters, landing in a crouch 20 feet away. She was female, or had been once, with white hair matted with blood and eyes that glowed crimson in the darkness. Her clothes were torn and filthy, her fingernails grown into claws. A feral vampire lost completely to the hunger. "Judgment?" she hissed. "From you? What right have you to judge us, old king? We are free while you cower behind your rules and your human pets." "I gave you a chance to surrender," Konstantin said coldly. "You refused. So be it." He moved, a blur of speed and power that Claire's human eyes couldn't possibly track. In less than a second, he'd crossed the distance and had the female Shadowborn by the throat, lifting her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. She clawed at his arm, shrieking, and the others dropped from their hiding places, 4 more rogues, all of them twisted by bloodlust and madness. They rushed Konstantin in a coordinated attack, but his vampires were ready. Lucien took down one with a sword thrust through the heart, the silver blade burning and paralyzing. 2 more were swarmed by his fighters, overwhelmed by numbers and superior skill. The last one, a male with wild eyes and foam at his mouth, broke through the line and ran straight for Claire. She didn't scream. Instead, she pulled the silver knife from her belt and stood her ground, and when the Shadowborn lunged, she drove the blade up into his chest with both hands, putting all her weight behind it. The rogue shrieked, silver burning him from the inside, and collapsed at her feet. Claire stumbled back, gasping, still holding the bloody knife. Konstantin snapped the female Shadowborn's neck with one sharp twist and dropped her body, then was at Claire's side in an instant. "Are you hurt?" "No, I'm okay." She was shaking, staring at the body at her feet. "Is he dead?" "Not yet." Konstantin knelt and pulled the silver knife from the rogue's chest, then drove it through his heart. The Shadowborn convulsed once and went still, truly dead this time. Now he is. Around them, the fight was ending. All 5 Shadowborn were down, dead or dying. His people had performed efficiently as always. "Burn the bodies," Konstantin ordered. "I want no trace of them remaining." "The woman fought well," Lucitu observed, nodding to Claire. "That one would have reached her if she hadn't stood firm." "I noticed." Konstantin turned to Claire, his expression unreadable. "You could have been killed, but I wasn't." She met his gaze steadily. "You taught me that running doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to stand and fight." I never said. He stopped, realizing she was right. In all their conversations, he had emphasized strength, courage, the importance of facing one's fears, and she had listened. "Come here," he said softly, and pulled her into his arms, heedless of the watching vampires. She came willingly, burying her face against his chest, and he felt her trembling, delayed shock, adrenaline crash, all the human reactions to violence and danger. "You're safe," he murmured into her hair. It's over, they can't hurt you now. I know. Her voice was muffled against his shirt. Because of you. They stayed like that while his people worked around them, building a fire and consigning the Shadowborn to ash. It was only when Lucien approached with a respectful cough that Konstantin finally released her. It's done, sire, the Chamberlain reported. All traces eliminated. I've sent word to the council as well, informing them of the violation and its resolution. Good. We'll return to the manor. Konstantin kept one arm around Claire as they walked back to the horses. She was still shaky on her feet, though she tried to hide it. The ride back was quieter, the vampires satisfied with their victory, Claire lost in her own thoughts. By the time they reached the manor, dawn was only a few hours away, and Konstantin could feel exhaustion pulling at him. He'd been active through too many daylight hours lately, and it was taking its toll. But he waited while Claire changed into clean clothes, and then he walked her back to the rose chamber, unwilling to let her be alone just yet. You should rest, he said as she settled onto the bed, still looking pale and shaken. What you did tonight, what you saw, it's a lot to process. I killed someone, she said quietly. Or something. I'm not sure which. You defended yourself against a monster who would have torn your throat out without hesitation, Konstantin corrected. You did nothing wrong, Claire. It doesn't feel like nothing. She looked up at him, tears shimmering. I can still feel the knife going in, the resistance of his flesh. I don't know if I can. He was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms again. You can and you will. You're stronger than you know. You proved that tonight. She clung to him, and he felt dampness on his shirt where her tears soaked through. He held her while she cried, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring comfort in half a dozen ancient languages until she finally quieted. Stay with me, she whispered, just for tonight. I don't want to be alone. Every instinct told him it was a bad idea. He was already too attached, already too invested in this fragile human woman. Staying would only deepen the connection between them, make the inevitable parting even harder, but he couldn't deny her. Not when she looked at him like that, with trust and need and something deeper shining in her eyes. I'll stay, he promised, and settled beside her on the bed, fully clothed, letting her curl against his side. Sleep, Claire, I'll keep watch. She was asleep within minutes, exhausted by the night's events. Konstantin lay awake, feeling her heartbeat against his ribs, her breath warm on his neck. Outside, the sky began to lighten with approaching dawn, and he knew he should move to his own chambers, to the reinforced darkness that would protect him from the sun. But he stayed. For her, he stayed. When Claire woke late the following evening, Konstantin was gone, but there was a note on the bedside table in elegant handwriting. Slept through the day in the chair by your bed. You snore adorably. Meet me in the library when you wake. We need to talk. She found him exactly where he'd promised, surrounded by books in a room that looked like something from a Gothic novel, floor-to-ceiling shelves, leather furniture, a fireplace large enough to stand in. He was reading by the light of several oil lamps, his white hair falling forward over his face. He looked up when she entered and smiled, and she felt her heart skip a beat at the warmth in his expression. You're awake, he said, setting his book aside. How do you feel? Better. Still processing everything, but better. She crossed to sit in the chair opposite his. Your note said we needed to talk. We do. His expression turned serious. The Shadowborn are eliminated, which means you're no longer in immediate danger. You're free to return to your life, to the city and your studies. I'll provide transportation and protection until you're safely home. Oh, the word came out small and hurt, and she hated how much the thought of leaving wounded her. So this is goodbye? That depends, Konstantin said carefully. On what you want. What I want, she laughed bitterly. I want to stay here with you. I want to keep having these conversations, keep learning about your world, she broke off, shaking her head. But that's not realistic, is it? I have a life, responsibilities. I can't just abandon everything to live in a vampire's manor. You could. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. If you wanted to. I meant what I said, Claire. You've changed something in me. These past few days with you have been extraordinary. I don't want them to end, but they have to, she said miserably. Don't they? I'm human, Konstantin. Even if I stayed, even if we tried to make this work, I'd grow old while you stayed young. I'd have maybe 60 years if I'm lucky, while you have eternity. How is that fair to you? 60 years with you would be worth more than 1,000 without, he said fiercely. But you're right that it's not ideal, which is why I'm offering you a choice. Her heart stuttered. What kind of choice? I could turn you, he said quietly. Make you like me. It would be a long process, years of preparation, training, ensuring you understand what you're giving up and what you're gaining. I wouldn't do it quickly or carelessly. But if you wanted immortality, wanted to share my life truly and completely, I would give that to you. Claire felt dizzy. the enormity of what he was offering almost too much to comprehend. "You'd do that? Turn me into a vampire?" "Only if it's what you truly want," he emphasized. "I won't pressure you, won't make the decision for you. But I wanted you to know the option exists. You don't have to choose between staying with me and remaining human. You could have both." "What would it be like?" she asked. "Being a vampire?" He considered carefully before answering. "Difficult at first. The bloodlust is overwhelming for new vampires, and learning control takes time. You'd be stronger, faster, and practically immortal. But you'd also have to give up sunlight, normal food, and the easy simplicity of human life. You'd outlive everyone you know, friends, colleagues, anyone who isn't turned alongside you. It's not a gift, Claire. It's a curse as much as a blessing, and I won't pretend otherwise. But you'd be there," she said, "to help me through it, to teach me. Every step of the way," he promised. "I would never abandon you to face this alone." She was quiet for a long time, turning it over in her mind. A week ago, she'd been a graduate student researching folklore, her biggest concerns being her thesis deadline and whether she could afford next month's rent. Now she was sitting in a vampire king's library, being offered immortality. Her life had become completely insane. But looking at Konstantin, at his perfect features and glowing eyes and the way he watched her with such intensity, such hope, she knew what her answer had to be. "I need time," she said. "Not to decide if I want to be with you, I already know that answer. But becoming a vampire, giving up my humanity, that's huge. I can't make that decision in a few days." Of course, if he was disappointed, he hid it well. "Take all the time you need, and in the meantime," he stood and crossed to her chair, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "In the meantime, we court properly. I take you on dates, show you my world, let you get to know the reality of vampire society before you decide to join it. And you show me yours, the university, the city, all the human experiences I've forgotten over the centuries. We learn each other truly and completely." "I'd like that," she whispered, tilting her face up to his, "very much." He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promise. And Claire felt something settle in her chest, a certainty that whatever she decided, whatever path she chose, it would be with this man by her side. The months that followed were among the happiest of Claire's life. Konstantin kept his word, courting her with old-world charm and modern sensibility. He took her to vampire gatherings where she met members of his court, including Morgana, who thawed considerably once she realized Claire wasn't a threat, but rather someone who genuinely cared for their king. He showed her the hidden vampire society that existed beneath the human world, the clubs and theaters and art galleries that catered to immortal clientele. In return, she brought him into her life. He attended her thesis defense, sitting in the back of the auditorium, anonymous in sunglasses and gloves to protect him from the faint sunlight filtering through the windows. He met her advisor, her fellow students, the friends she'd been too busy to see much over the past years. He learned to navigate the modern university system and even made a substantial donation to the folklore department, ensuring they'd have funding for years to come. They split their time between his manor and her small apartment in the city, though increasingly Claire found herself preferring his home. There was something magical about the estate, with its ancient trees and Gothic architecture, and the sense of stepping out of time. She converted one of the manor's unused rooms into a study, filling it with her books and research materials, and Konstantin declared it the finest addition to his home in centuries. 6 months after that fateful dawn when she'd collapsed on his doorstep, he took her to his private chambers for the first time, a suite of rooms deep in the manor's oldest wing, where no sunlight had penetrated in 500 years. It was beautiful in a dark, luxurious way, all black silk and antique furniture and walls lined with treasures from across the centuries. "This is where I sleep," he said, gesturing to the massive bed draped in velvet. "When I sleep, which isn't often, mostly I read or work, or recently," he smiled. "Recently I find myself thinking about you." "Just thinking?" Claire asked, emboldened by the wine she'd drunk at dinner and the desire that had been building between them for months. His eyes flared red. "Not just thinking," he admitted. "Claire, I've been trying to be honorable, to give you time and space to make your decision without physical intimacy clouding your judgment. But I won't lie, I want you, desperately, constantly. It's taking every ounce of my considerable control not to." She kissed him, cutting off the words, and he made a sound low in his throat that might have been a growl. His arms came around her, crushing her against him, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice rough. "Claire, if we do this, I'm sure," she said firmly. "I love you, Konstantin. I've loved you for months now, and I want this. I want you." What followed was both tender and passionate, gentle and fierce. He was careful with her, achingly so, constantly checking to make sure she was comfortable, that he wasn't too cold or too strong or too otherworldly. But as the night wore on, that careful control began to slip, and Claire learned what it truly meant to be desired by an immortal being. Afterward, she lay in his arms in the enormous bed, feeling pleasantly exhausted and deeply satisfied. That was, she started, then laughed. I don't even have words. Agreed, he murmured into her hair. 500 years of experience and nothing has ever felt like that. She tilted her head to look at him. Because you love me? Because I love you, he confirmed. Though I should warn you, vampire love is intense, possessive. Once we commit to someone, we don't let go easily. Good, she said simply. Because I don't plan on going anywhere. They fell into comfortable silence, and Claire found herself tracing the lines of his face, memorizing every detail. He was so beautiful, so impossibly perfect, and somehow he'd chosen her. I've made my decision, she said quietly. He went very still. About becoming a vampire, about immortality. She propped herself up on one elbow so she could see his face clearly. I want it. I want to be with you. Not just for the handful of decades I have left as a human, but for centuries. For forever, if that's possible. Claire, his voice was thick with emotion. Are you certain? Once it's done, there's no going back. I'm certain, she said firmly. I've spent 6 months learning about your world, understanding what I'd be giving up and what I'd be gaining. I know it won't be easy. I know the bloodlust will be difficult, that I'll have to give up the sun and watch the human world change without me. But none of that matters compared to losing you. He pulled her down into a kiss that was somehow both gentle and desperate. When they finally broke apart, there were tears on his cheeks, something she'd never seen before. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever, he whispered. Hope, a future that doesn't stretch out empty and alone. I will spend every day of our immortal lives making sure you never regret this choice. I know, she said, wiping away his tears with her thumbs. So when do we start? Tomorrow, he said. I'll begin teaching you control techniques, meditation, ways to strengthen your will before the physical transformation. It will take at least a year, possibly 2, to prepare you properly. But when we finally do turn you, you'll be ready, I promise. True to his word, Konstantin began her training the very next day. She learned to meditate for hours, to control her breathing and heartbeat, to separate her mind from physical sensations. She studied vampire history and law, learning the intricate politics that governed their society. She practiced combat with Lucien, who turned out to be a patient if demanding teacher, until she could hold her own against opponents much stronger than her. The vampire court watched her progress with interest. Some, like Lucien and surprisingly Morgana, were supportive, pleased that their king had found happiness. Others were more skeptical, questioning whether a human, even one being prepared for transformation, truly belonged among them. But Konstantin silenced the doubters quickly and absolutely. Claire was his chosen mate, he declared, and once she completed her transformation, she would be their queen. Anyone who disrespected her would answer to him personally. The descent died quickly after that. 14 months after she'd made her decision, Konstantin declared her ready. They chose the day carefully, the anniversary of the morning she'd collapsed on his doorstep, a full circle bringing her back to where it all began. The night before the transformation, she called her academic advisor and withdrew from the doctoral program, citing personal reasons. She'd already published 2 papers from her research and quietly transferred her notes to a promising undergraduate, ensuring her work would continue. She wrote letters to the few friends she had, vague explanations about traveling abroad and needing to step away from her old life. She donated most of her possessions to charity and transferred what little money she had to an account Konstantin had set up for her. By dawn, Claire Zimmerman, the human graduate student, had effectively ceased to exist. Only Claire remained, standing in Konstantin's chambers, ready to begin her new life. Last chance, he said softly, his hands gentle on her shoulders. If you have any doubts, any hesitation at all, we can wait. There's no rush. No doubts, she said firmly. I want this, I want you. I want the life we'll build together. So please, Konstantin, turn me. The transformation itself was simultaneously more and less than she'd expected. His bite was painful but brief, his venom burning through her veins like liquid fire. Then he cut his own wrist and held it to her lips, and she drank deeply, the taste of his blood strange and metallic, and somehow perfect. Sleep now, he murmured, laying her gently on the bed as the transformation began to take hold. When you wake, you'll be like me, immortal, mine, always yours, she whispered, and let the darkness take her. The transformation took 3 days. Konstantin never left her side, enduring her screams and thrashing as the venom rewrote her from the inside out. Lucien brought him blood when he needed it, updates on the court when he demanded them, but mostly he just sat vigil, holding Claire's hand and willing her to survive. Most humans didn't survive the transformation. The mortality rate was nearly 70%, the change too violent, the shock too great. But Claire had been prepared, her will strengthened by months of training, and on the evening of the third day her eyes opened. They were red, glowing crimson, bright with newborn hunger and power. "Konstantin?" Her voice was different, still recognizably hers, but clearer, more resonant. "I'm here." He helped her sit up, watching her carefully for signs of distress. "How do you feel?" She considered the question, and he watched awareness dawn across her features. "Everything is more. I can hear your heartbeat even though it's so slow. I can smell the leather of your boots, the oil in the lamps, the stone of the walls, and I'm so hungry." Her voice broke on the last word, desperation creeping in. "I know, here." He'd prepared for this, had fresh blood waiting in a crystal glass. He handed it to her and watched her drink, saw the way relief flooded her features as the hunger receded. "Better?" he asked when the glass was empty. "Better," she agreed. Then she looked down at her hands, watching them move with new speed and precision. "This is incredible. Is this how you experience the world all the time?" "Welcome to immortality," he said with a smile. "Come, let me show you what you've become." He led her to a full-length mirror, and Claire gasped at her reflection. Her skin had gone alabaster pale, luminous in the lamplight. Her dark hair now had threads of silver running through it, and when she smiled, experimenting with her new features, he caught the flash of fangs. But it was her eyes that had changed the most. They still held flecks of the warm brown they'd been, but now they glowed with inner light, crimson and gold mixing into something uniquely hers. "I'm beautiful," she whispered, wonder in her voice. "You were always beautiful," Konstantin corrected, coming to stand behind her, his hands on her shoulders. "But yes, now you're one of us, a vampire, and soon my queen." The coronation took place a month later, once Claire had gained enough control over her bloodlust to be presented safely to the court. It was a lavish affair, attended by vampire nobility from across the continent, all of them curious to meet the human woman who had captured their king's heart so completely that he'd turned her and claimed her as mate. Claire wore a gown of deep burgundy velvet, medieval in style but updated with modern touches, and a crown of silver and rubies that Konstantin had commissioned specially for her. She stood beside him on the dais in his great hall, facing hundreds of ancient vampires, and when he took her hand and declared her his queen, his chosen mate for all eternity, the court erupted in applause. Morgana was among the first to approach afterward, offering a graceful curtsy. "Welcome, Your Majesty," she said, and there was genuine warmth in her voice. "I had my doubts, I'll admit, but you've proven yourself worthy of our king's devotion." "Thank you," Claire said, inclining her head regally. She'd been practicing royal bearing with Lucien for weeks. "I hope to serve both Konstantin and this court well." "I'm certain you will," Morgana replied with a smile. The celebration lasted until dawn, and when the last guests had finally departed, Konstantin swept Claire up into his arms and carried her to their chambers, not his old suite but a new one they'd designed together, blending his ancient tastes with her modern sensibilities. "How does it feel?" he asked, setting her gently on the bed. "Being queen, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure," she admitted. "But right, it feels right being here with you, sharing this life. Any regrets?" The question was casual, but she heard the uncertainty beneath it. "Nah," she said firmly, pulling him down beside her. "Not one. You gave me immortality, but more than that, you gave me love, purpose, a place where I belong. How could I regret that?" He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and she felt the now familiar rush of power and desire that came with being vampire. They made love slowly, luxuriously, with all the time in the world stretching out before them. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the enormous bed, Claire found herself thinking about that morning 14 months ago, collapsing on his doorstep at dawn, exhausted and terrified and certain she was going to die. She'd had no idea that she was actually stumbling toward salvation, toward a love that would reshape her entire existence. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. Konstantin stirred. "For what?" "For finding me, for keeping me, for loving me enough to give me forever." "Claire," he propped himself up on one elbow, his red eyes soft with emotion. "You gave me something far more valuable than I gave you. You reminded me what it means to feel, to hope, to love. You took a king who'd been going through the motions of existence for centuries and made him want to truly live again. If anyone should be grateful, it's me." "Then we'll be grateful together," she said with a smile. "For the next few centuries at least." "At least," he agreed, and kissed her again. In the years that followed, they built a life that was everything Claire had dreamed of and more. She took to vampire politics with surprising skill, becoming not just a queen in title but a true partner in ruling their territory. She advocated for better protections for newly turned vampires, established educational programs about the human world for older vampires who'd lost touch with modernity, and even opened diplomatic channels with several vampire nations that Konstantin had been feuding with for decades. She also continued her academic work in a new form, writing extensively about vampire culture and history under a pseudonym, publishing articles that would later become foundational texts for vampire scholars. The mortal world would never know who really authored them, but that was fine with her. Some secrets were meant to be kept. 10 years after her transformation, on the anniversary of both finding him and becoming vampire, Konstantin took her back to the place where it had all begun, the stone steps where she'd collapsed that dawn. "I come here sometimes," he admitted, standing with his arm around her waist, both of them comfortable in the darkness, "to remember that morning. The terror I felt when I thought I might lose you before I'd even really found you. But you didn't lose me," Claire said softly. "You saved me. In every way a person can be saved." "No," he corrected, turning to face her fully. "We saved each other. You were running from monsters and I was slowly turning into one, cold and isolated and forgetting what it meant to care about anything. We found each other at exactly the right moment, and everything changed." "Everything changed," she agreed, and in the moonlight her eyes glowed as brightly as his. They stood there together as the night deepened around them. Two immortal beings who'd found the rarest thing in an eternal existence, true love that would last forever. Behind them the manor blazed with lights, full of life and laughter, and the vampires who made up their court. Ahead of them stretched centuries of time, adventures they'd share, challenges they'd face together. But in that moment, they were simply Konstantin and Claire, king and queen, vampire and vampire, standing on the steps where fate had first brought them together, and silently promising each other all the tomorrows that immortality could offer. The story of how the vampire king found her fainted on his doorstep at dawn and canceled the hunt to stay near her would be told throughout vampire society for generations to come, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing in any world, mortal or immortal, was simply the courage to love with everything you had, and the wisdom to recognize your other half when fate delivered them to your door. And they did love, deeply and completely, for all the long years that followed. There were challenges, certainly political struggles, external threats, the endless complications of vampire society. But they faced everything together, two souls bound by choice and blood and a love that had proven stronger than death itself. In the end, that was all that mattered. Not the crowns they wore or the power they wielded, but the simple truth that they had found each other when they needed it most and built something beautiful from that chance encounter at dawn. They had forever, and they intended to make every moment count.